Defect is the first game from Emptyvessel, which is comprised of a group of developers who have worked on projects like Doom, Killing Floor, Borderlands, The Last of Us, and even Blade Runner 2049. Defect is an immersive squad-based first-person shooter that will feature PvE and PvP modes. The gameplay we've seen so far features these chunky dystopian cyberpunk weapons tearing the environment apart in these intense CQC battles. It gives off the feeling of being a part of a MaxTac unit from Cyberpunk 2077, but set in a grimdark hellscape. A dystopian city controlled by an AI, consciousness transfer technology, game-controlled megastructures. The game is filled with these intriguing cyberpunk variables that instantly pique my interest, and I haven't even mentioned that Mick Gordon seems to be doing the soundtrack and sound design for the game. We don't know much about the world of Defect yet, as we only have 3 trailers for the game to go off of, but today I would like to expand on the details we do have to see what insight we can get about the world of Defect, how it works, and what potential stories they may tell in the game. To do this, I'm going to break the information into 4 categories: the setting, the system, the technology, and the factions. So let's get started. The game takes place in a city that has only been referred to as man's last resort. We learn from the Steam description that this is the last habitable location humanity has, and in the reveal trailer, the narrator indicates that everything outside of the city would kill any human unfortunate enough to find themselves there. We don't have any insight into what is actually beyond the city walls yet, but given that we see these multi-armed guys and the gang members have pretty distorted Gears of War type forms, I wonder if there are literal monsters in this universe. Perhaps this is the result of some kind of genetic experimentation that brought on the dystopian environment we see in-game. We also get a few glimpses of the skyline of the city where we see that it is almost entirely composed of these brutalist towers that seem to be these massive living quarters for all of humanity. Perhaps the harsh environment has pushed people almost entirely indoors to protect themselves from air pollution. This would fall in line with the explosive plumes of fire we see coming from all of the buildings, further indicating that not a lot of care is being given to what kind of pollutants are forced into the atmosphere. In the gameplay trailer, we get a good look at the exterior of the structure the team is entering for their mission. Here we can see that the verticality of the city has an immense influence on its design. Even this street view, if you could call it that, seems to be elevated, showing that the actual surface of the planet is hidden beneath endless eras of construction. We also see the utilitarian design furthered by the lack of street or building names present outside of the building they enter. It's just named Building 193 here, and while we do know that the streets do have names, I think it's another piece of information that shows just how far removed this world is from ours. I believe a lot of these elements are largely determined by the system, the AI which controls the city, but we'll talk more about that in the next section. The interiors that we see largely remind me of that slum tower from the 2012 Judge Dredd movie. Honestly, there are even some security camera scenes from the extended gameplay trailer that seem really inspired by the cinematography of that film, and that's not a bad thing at all. This also fits because I'm really imagining the PvE missions in the game to be like shorter cyberpunk versions of the movie The Raid, and this setting seems great for that. This all indicates to me that humanity has been largely relegated to these structures in which they have these homogenized communities that exist in spite of the brutal nature of their existence. Surely these conditions are what led to the gains we see the characters fighting against in the trailers. Some rebellious faction of humans forced to live in these conditions, searching for a way out through violent or unsavory means. In the extended gameplay trailer, we even hear what I believe is one of these game bosses welcome the team as they enter the building to what he calls the grinder. I kind of love the idea that this isn't just referring to them getting ground up by a hail of bullets, but rather the name given to the building by this hostile group that has seized control of it. The final note that I have on the setting has to do with the system, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. So I'll put this here. This AI seems to be positioned as the supreme authority within the city, and I think the city's design almost has a circuit board style configuration with this large tower maybe being the CPU. It could be interesting if, since the city was maybe designed by an AI, it relied on the silicate architecture it was most familiar with to plan out the city structure itself. I wonder if a military style barracks or a public works facility would be positioned or designed to resemble different components on a motherboard. Maybe seeing an in game version of a city map will give us a clearer view of how the system sees humanity. Are we simply data storage vessels? Are we software being written and rewritten? Or are we a virus the system seeks to stomp out? I have a feeling it may be a mix of all three. Like I said earlier, the system is the AI which controls the city and all humans in it, with what seems like very little consideration being given as to what is humane. It sends out its teams of executioners to eliminate any who oppose the AI rule or seek to otherwise go against its wishes. We learn in the extended gameplay trailer that it even asks of these operatives to constantly monitor fellow officers for any signs of, quote, deviation, further signifying that the system's control is either the result of intimidation or fear. I believe it is the system that narrates the extended gameplay trailer, and we do hear it say that if you serve and protect, the system will set you free. This seems to indicate that the officers are slaves of some sort, which makes more sense when we see some of the consciousness transfer technology in the trailers. It seems as though the technological capabilities of the system are so vast that it has the capacity to trap your mind inside of different vessels, which could explain how oppressive the city is towards humanity and why the gains fighting against it are so gruesome. We also get this line from the gameplay reveal trailer, quote, "What did they promise you? Freedom, family? The system knows you're one of us." Which makes it seem like some officers may be transferring their consciousness to escape their service to the AI. I believe this is coming from the VR guy here in the tub, and we see at the end of the trailer that the player, or the person whose POV we are following, wakes up within one of these six-armed bodies, just like the one that he killed at the computer earlier. This is pretty dark when you consider that what could be happening here is that the officer's consciousness was transferred to one of these things to work as a slave for the gain, and rather than sending a rescue mission in for the last guy that this happened to, the system sent in a team to eliminate them. This society is suffering through a complete moral collapse, where there is no longer justice or righteousness, only an authoritarian AI utilizing the resources it has available to it to achieve goals in the most logical and inhumane way possible. Next, let's look at some of the technology that exists in this universe and how the system is manipulating it to further its plans. The mission that we see playing out in the extended gameplay trailer is to terminate a rogue AI. So while the system has absolute control over the city, there are still holes in its network that allow for the illegal operations and proliferation of separate AIs to emerge. It appears that to eliminate this AI, the team gathers a data cube from this feeble human in the bathtub that we talked about earlier. This poor guy in the tub appears to be at least partially disconnected from the physical world here, and I wonder if the rogue AI is piggybacking on his human neural network to outmaneuver the system. The team then takes this data cube further into the building, where the system directs them to utilize the data to access the system mainframe and wipe the drive to unlock access to the floors past level 80. These data cubes seem like pivotal tech that we will be trying to get our hands on. They appear to be capable of conducting complex computational tasks, and one of the team members even has a special carrying case for them. Another key piece of technology will be the consciousness transfers we talked about earlier. It seems like this will work as a revive mechanic while in the game. In the extended gameplay trailer, we see one of our teammates get blown up as they start to clear a room. Shortly after this, we see the POV of an officer stunning a gang member. The officer approaches and gets a revive prompt while the voiceover says, "Consciousness transfer approved." We then see the officer use this dual-pronged device to seemingly install the consciousness of his fallen comrade into the body of the gang member. Next thing we know, the gang member is running around as a teammate, raiding the building with us. It's not very clear if this entirely kills the original person in that body, and I wonder if maybe the data cubes you pick up also act as revive tokens in the sense that you can store your down teammates on them for transfer later. The common theme between the technologies on display is their integration with biological sentience, despite an entirely irreverent attitude towards the human. This mirrors the way that the system seems to have no respect for humanity itself. Funnily enough, it seems as though this doesn't result in a united human rebellion, but rather a constant war between human factions. The factions that have been presented to us thus far are the police, the Gains, and the rogue police. It seems that the Gains represent anarchy, chaos, and disorder, the antithesis to the logical, rigid, structured society that the system envisions for humanity. In opposition to the Gains, we have the police, establishing the standard framework for the game of, cops versus robbers. But this position is complicated by the fact that they aren't really law enforcement. We do see in the mission selection menu at the start of the extended gameplay trailer an arrest mission, but even this is contrasted by this narration.
The law is an illusion. In the system, there are no cops, no judges, only executioners.
This is all to say that it's not as simple as good guys versus bad guys. This really depicts the situation as having both the cops and the gang members under the thumb of the system, fighting it out for larger goals that they themselves have no true understanding of. The Steam description is where we get the reference to rogue police, which seems to be an element that further complicates the operations we engage with, but once again, the ending of that extended gameplay trailer seems to indicate that some of these officers may not have ended up in these multi-armed forms willingly. This further brings into question who the unseen warring factions are. Perhaps the larger story is about the rogue AIs battling the system, or maybe there is a larger organized assembly of humans, a rebellion that's covertly operating somewhere in these megastructures. Like I mentioned earlier, it seems that the game will feature PvE missions and PvP modes, so we'll get to take part in both sides of these battles. The Steam page also touts a, quote, new 4v4v4v4 PvP mode featuring dynamic multi-objective battles with advanced weapons and tech, and I am a sucker for some dynamic multiplayer games. The bones of what's here are a classic conglomeration of cyberpunk dread. Humanity subjected to the will of its creations on a planet it most likely had a hand in destroying, now forced to live with the unsettling consequences of their ancestors' actions. And we get to experience the rad hellscape from the POV of a badass warrior. What's not to love? This has just been a rough exploration of the world of DEFECT. We don't have a lot of answers as to the specifics of this world just yet, but it does seem like there will be quite a bit to uncover when the game arrives. While I can't tell if it will have a consistent, complex narrative worthy of deep diving into yet, I do think the world they are establishing will at the very least make an excellent backdrop for the game they are making. I'm excited to explore more when we get the opportunity to do so. Let me know your thoughts on DEFECT in the comments, and I will see you later. Bye.